There's a lot of things that people say about salt lamps that are complete nonsense. So here's some salt lamp nonsense. Negative ions. I hate to rock the boat. Well, I don't care. But if anybody's ever told you that salt lamps emit negative ions, they don't. That literally defies the laws of physics. In fact, the only situation where salt more broadly would ever do this is if you heated the salt to above melting point, which thankfully a 15-watt fridge bulb is not likely to do, which is probably a good thing because who wants molten salt traipsing across their front room? In fact, above every single myth that I'm going to recite to you throughout the duration of this video, this is the one that's the most indelibly etched into salt lamp marketing. Basically, everyone says it. They never offer any proof or any description. In fact, ask them what an ion is or does, and then watch their explanation fall into some flimsy jelly of nonsense and made-up words thrown together in some ham-fisted sentence. Seasonal affective disorder. Full disclosure, there is actually some academic skepticism amongst the psychological community as to whether or not seasonal affective disorder even exists. But even if it does, saying that salt lamps are somehow some kind of cure for it is particularly manipulative. There hasn't been a single study even trying to assess this, let alone concluding it. It's merely suppliers latching onto something for which there is literally no evidence for or against and running with it because it sounds good when slipped into a pitch. Mention an esoteric and pretty vague condition with perpetually flexible characteristics that could apply to almost anyone, and then suggest the thing you're trying to sell cures it. If you are suffering from a condition that conforms to the characteristics laid out in seasonal affective disorder, I'm sorry to say that a salt lamp is not going to help, at least not in any meaningful or long-term sense. Contact your physician and make guided alterations to your lifestyle. These will probably make a positive and ultimately effective change to your situation. Look at your diet, for example. A salt lamp certainly won't hurt, but if someone is leveraging a condition as a means to sell something without evidence, then they are opportunistically weaponizing your discomfort for the sake of making money, and that is extremely unethical. Salt lamps kill cats! If I was a cat, and full disclosure, I'm not, I would find this myth really infuriating because it lives and breathes on the assumption that cats are complete idiots. If you've ever posted a photograph of your new salt lamp on the internet, no doubt somebody will have casually slipped into the comment section and said, "Salt lamps kill cats!" Let me be the first person to articulate this in the most coherent way I am able. They don't, unless your cat's an idiot. This rumour started from an unverified anecdote from a New Zealand woman in 2013 who had to admit her cat to the vets because it allegedly licked the family salt lamp so much that it caused a critical level of dehydration, which is immediately suspicious because mammals have evolved with something called thirst that allows them to mitigate things such as elevated sodium levels, meaning, if true, the cat's discomfort was probably caused by the absence of water than it was by the abundance of salt. Yes, believe it or not, cats need water, which probably means the woman that took her cat to the vet just wasn't leaving out water. In truth, your cat may very well lick the lamp. It's a cat. They're brittle, and it's the kind of thing that cats do. But will it harm them? No. As far as I know, they've literally never killed anyone's cat, and I sell salt lamps, so I have a professional obligation to have looked. And trust me, I have. The only example of a cat even indirectly suffering as a result of the existence of salt lamps was 10 years ago and seems to have only reared its head on unfiltered amateur blogs, which makes me question as to whether or not it's even true. So, I wouldn't worry, this myth is just an example of the internet being the internet. Protects against radiation. Did anybody watch that HBO series, Chernobyl? If you haven't seen it, great show. But if you did, do you remember that scene where they're all sat around the table and the reactor is split open and they're looking for ways of stemming the radiation? So they say, I know, we'll drop metric tons of boron onto it. For context, boron is quite a rare element that's not often found in the Earth's crust. It's very expensive and even more difficult to find. Do you notice what they didn't do? Do you notice nobody stood up from that table and said, let's use Himalayan salt? Do you know why? Because that's ridiculous. It's beyond me where this one has originated because it's flagrantly ludicrous. The first time somebody said this to me, I nearly spat out my lunch. No, salt lamps do not get rid of radiation. This defies almost every firmly understood factoid pertaining to physics and chemistry and is an affront to common sense, which is before we take into account that the kind of radiation that you are subjected to on a daily basis, which is non-ionising radiation, is so negligible that you really don't need defending from it in the first place. Defence against viruses! Out of every flimsy anecdote-soaked rag of hyperbole that has been draped over salt lamps these past few years, none piss me off quite as much as this one. I've sold salt lamps for years, but funnily enough, this myth only started to rear its head when we had a pandemic. Funny that. In fact, the sheer gall and cheek that somebody would use this as a unique selling point to flog their inventory disgusts me on a cellular level. You probably don't need me to tell you this, but no, salt lamps are not a viral defence mechanism. Don't get me wrong, I wish they were, because ignoring the obvious societal advantage of such a phenomenon, I would be rich enough to eat breakfast in bed from a Fabergé egg served to me by a peregrine falcon in a tuxedo who arrived on a very rare train set. So please, for the love of God, don't buy into such an underhanded sales pitch because it's baseless. Conclusion! Look, salt lamps are great. I'm just personally not willing to lie in order to sell them, nor have I ever felt it necessary in order to do so. They make great natural dehumidifiers and can make any cold room seem just that little bit warmer. They're beautiful, comforting, relaxing, and make a great focal point for any room. They also make great night lights for kids. Do they cure cancer? No, because that's ridiculous. Are they a cure for real-world problems? No, because that is also ridiculous. They are mild symptom management and gorgeous natural products that have a habit of making people feel more comfortable. That is demonstrable. Nobody has to lie in order to sell them. They sell themselves. Sellers will very often try and leverage things that are too vague for you to question. How do you know if your room has less radiation? Do you just grow less ears on your back? Is that it? Is that a thing? How do you see these negative ions? How do you measure this in order to justify your refund? You can't. That's the point. That's why the claims are always suspiciously esoteric and vague. So ask the people saying them for more information. How do you know that? Where was that studied? What peer-reviewed journal did that appear in? And watch them fall to pieces, because I assure you they won't be prepared to answer. And if they aren't prepared to answer, then they shouldn't pretend they are qualified to make such claims in the first place. Salt lamps are great products. They do exactly what they say on the tin, but I'm afraid that sometimes sadly depends on what's been written on that tin and by who. They absorb moisture, mitigate dust amongst other pollutants, act as a mild expectorant, and look stunning. They don't emit negative ions, they don't cure radiation, they don't impact seasonal affective disorder, and they probably won't kill your cat. So please, sleep and breathe easy, because we sell great products, not magic ones.